be recorded.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting of January 25 to order. Please call the roll.
Okay. Mayor Worth?
Here.
Alderman Nurbin?
Here.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer? Commissioner?
Can you tone it down?
Commissioner Stoker?
Here.
Commissioner Lemke? You're muted, Commissioner Lemke, but I see you. Commissioner Jim Schaefer? I think he'll be arriving late, Mayor. Commissioner Chorin?
I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about me telling you.
And Commissioner Gentis, I think will also be late. Commissioner Bach?
Here.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Okay, so we do have 6 in attendance now.
Okay, I am supposed to, at the beginning of each of these virtual meetings, make 4 announcements. First and foremost, please don't talk over each other. It's hard enough in person, but it's particularly hard when things are being recorded. If you're going to speak and I haven't said your name first, please announce your name, because there are people who are listening in and not necessarily seeing the video. The public, we encourage public participation in all of our meetings, but we ask that any member of the public who'd like to speak sign up in advance so that we can keep some sort of order with these meetings. It's a little bit harder doing them virtually. And finally, and most importantly, and this applies to everybody, but particularly non-commissioners, non-staff members, please, unless you're speaking, keep your phone muted or your computer muted. Already during the roll call, we heard, people talking in the background, and we don't want to, it's hard. Don't necessarily need to hear your dog barking or anything else. So, but thank you all for coming this evening. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from December 14th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? I see
Second.
Commissioner Hawley with a second. Any discussion, corrections, or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Excuse me. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. I'll read through them briefly and then look for a motion. St. Francis Borgia is looking for an additional sign at the east end of the cemetery. Mr. Rosh is looking for a fill permit. Mequon Medical is looking for a fill permit. And Athlete Performance is looking for a master sign plan approval. Are there any items that people would like to have removed from the consent agenda to be discussed separately? Alderman Nurbin.
I'd like to remove items B and C just for a mild amendment to the language regarding the road bond for the fill permit.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve A and D then?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Alderman Nurbin.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring forward the language used for regarding the road bond for items B and C under consent agenda are slightly inconsistent with the other items on the agenda, mainly for MTSD. I'm proposing adopting the language used in those items, in these items. In this item, the essence of it, we say we require the road bond. In the other items, we say that they shall determine the route so we can determine if we need a road bond and how much it should be. And I think that's actually what we're doing, actually what we mean in these. It's just not what we say. So it's just simply adopting the language used in those other items on the same agenda in these 2 items to make that clarification. we don't even know how much, if we need or how much to charge yet, but we're saying we require it. It's just kind of odd.
Director of Public Works, Ms. Lundin, are you available? I see your name.
I can be, yes.
Any objection to what Alderman Urban is recommending?
No.
Okay. Alderman Urban, is that a motion to approve with that changed language?
It is.
Is there a second? Excuse me, Mr. Zader.
I just also wanted to clarify, I did speak with the applicant for the Rosh, Phil, and there is I guess, an incorrect terminology in the staff recommendation for number 1. It should be, fill should be in the floodway, not the floodplain. And then the 100-year floodway, it should, instead of 100-year floodplain, it should be floodway. We just want to clarify that the whole property is in the floodplain. So he's not filling in the floodway. And just to clarify, this is just to remove poor soil and bring in some clean and structural soil. In the future, they will be coming back for additional fill in the flood fringe, which will require some approvals from FEMA, which they're working on right now. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. Urban, is that consistent with your motion and acceptable?
It's acceptable. I think I'll accept it as an addition to my motion.
Okay, is there a second to the motion being made by Alderman Urban? Mr. Stoker seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. So thank you to all 4 of those applicants. The next item of business is a Door County construction seeking to a proposed 9-lot single-family subdivision for the 73-acre parcel located southwest of Lakeshore Drive and Pioneer Road. I understand that Papula is going to give us a brief explanation.
Yes, Mayor. We can pull it up on the screen if you guys would like. Jack, it is on page 96 if you wanted to share your screen. But the proposal is for 9 lots. They range from 5 acres to 5.6 acres. The lots are consistent with the land use plan designation of 5-acre minimum and the R1 zoning district. The lots will be served by individual driveways off of Pioneer and Lakeshore Drive. One of the lots does have access off of Shady Lane. When reviewing new developments, staff does look at opportunities to connect. In this case, there's no road proposed, so there's no opportunity to connect to adjacent developments. Staff is recommending a 50-foot landscape easement along Pioneer Road and Lakeshore Drive. Within this easement area, staff is recommending clusters of 2 to 3 trees for areas that are outside of the wetlands. There are several wetlands on the site, so there's limited areas to propose any sort of landscaping, but the landscape plan should come back to Planning Commission for approval prior to final plat. And again, there are several wetlands on site. There is an outlet proposed that will to the north. I don't know if you guys can see or it's in your plan. A majority of the wetlands, the high quality ones, should be located in the outlet. Staff is recommending a tree preservation area for that outlet. And a wetland delineation report with concurrence from the Wisconsin DNR will be required. Staff is supportive of the subdivision plat, preliminary plat. There is one correction to note on the condition, on condition 15, there's a reference to lot 9 for a private wastewater treatment system and fill permit. That should be for it says lot 1, it should be for lot 9. So that, if we could just note that correction in the approval. With that, we do support the preliminary plat subject to the conditions in the report.
Thank you. Is the applicant on the line? And do they wish to say anything? Well, we're fine if people don't want to talk, but certainly want to give applicants an opportunity. Hearing none, is there a motion to a motion? And please add in Papula's one correction. I saw Ms. Schaefer's hand up first, I believe. No, Mr. Stoker.
I would motion to approve per the 24 requirements per staff's recommendation, as well as the correction on the lot number for the private on-site sanitary system.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bach. Any discussion? Ms. Schaefer?
Thanks. Two questions. I'm sorry if I'm missing this, Pafula, but it looks like more than 9 lots are delineated on here. Can you kind of count, is there a way to count them out with the pointer? It looks like more than 9.
Jack has,
Thank you, Jack. Look at that. That's nice. So that upper left corner, which would be the southwest corner, is not a lot, nor, right? It's kind of got a weird little tail to it. That's not a lot.
that's the full
That's
outlot.
part of the outlet. And then these 2 little fun squares that are in the lower right corner, which would be the northeast, that's also not, those are not.
Those are existing single-family homes, so it's not part of.
Okay. My other question is,
But they are fun.
pardon?
But they are fun. You said the
Yeah,
2
they
fun
are.
little.
Well, yes. Speaking of fun, this is an area of the city in which we have had some other discussions about a different development in a different area, further, a little bit further south. But I'm wondering, because there was a lot of public opinion on that specific development, I'm assuming that neighbors got the green postcard and got adequate notification that this was on the agenda. Just for their awareness, I understand this is a different situation than the one that I'm referring to, but wanted to make sure that they were aware.
Yep, we did send out notifications, our normal notification postcards to adjacent property owners, and we didn't hear from anyone. I think residents in the area are probably supportive of the 5-acre minimum, and there's no zoning in this, situation, so
Yep.
they meet the land use plan and the plan zone.
Yep, different situation. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Schaefer, Jim Schaefer.
Yes, I talked to some of the neighbors and they were very happy with the development. It's exactly what they wanted. So I didn't hear any objections.
Great. Anybody else? We have a motion and a second with the one correction be included in the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. The next item is a proposed 78,200 square foot office research and manufacturing facility for a 7.7 acre parcel in the business park. I understand Papua is going to lead us through this item also.
Yes, Mayor. Jack, if you want to go to 127, to show the elevations. So the parcel is part of a land division that Planning Commission approved in April 2020 that created 2 lots and an outlot. It's located east of Commerce Street and south of Executive Drive. As the mayor mentioned, this will be a new office research development and manufacturing facility for COPS Industries. They will be relocating their business to this new location. The proposal meets all of the requirements of the B5 zoning district. The plans do show a future addition and parking lot expansion, which would make the site non-conforming to the open space requirement. And the applicant is aware that they will need to utilize open space borrowing to achieve compliance with the open space requirement. Any building and site plan amendment will need Planning Commission approval in the future. At this time, the applicant does not have an expected time frame for when the expansion would go in. It would just depend on how they need to expand in the future. The plan shows 83 cells, which meets the code requirements and the needs of the tenant as indicated. If you guys can take a look at the elevations on the screen here, the building materials proposed are insulated metal panels, painted precast panels, aluminum canopy elements, and storefront glazing systems. The applicant indicated that there's no rooftop screening shown on the plans because based on the height, they don't think that any rooftop units will be visible from public view. Staff wants to add a condition that rooftop screening shall be required if rooftop units are visible from the street view once construction is complete. So this item did not make it to the condition, but staff asked that the Planning Commission consider adding condition for the rooftop screening unit once construction is complete if it is visible. Staff wants to further address 2 of the elevations. So Jack, if you want to go to 127 or see the full elevations, thank you. So the north elevation is proposed to be entirely constructed of insulated metal panel. This is the expansion.
Excuse me 1 second, Papua. Jack, can you enlarge the picture on the screen, please? It's,
Yeah, I could get in there a little bit.
thank you.
So the elevation on the bottom is the north elevation. This is the expansion wall for the future addition. So staff does support the metal panel in this area. However, since the applicant does not have an estimate of when the addition will go in, planning staff is recommending that if there's no proposal within 5 years of this approval date, that the applicant return to Planning Commission to discuss the expansion status and evaluate the materials of the north elevation as a result. In addition, staff has concerns regarding the east elevation, which is also entirely metal panel. If you scroll up, Jack, I think it's the one on the top. This elevation faces the existing stormwater pond and it is heavily screened from view. However, Planning Commission has not approved metal panel as a primary material in the business park. Staff recommends that the metal panels be permitted, but only as 50% of the materials for the elevation, and that the other materials match the materials of and south elevation. In addition to that, staff is just recommending additional landscaping at the northwest corner and southwest corner just to better screen the building from view. With that, staff does recommend approval of the building.
Thank you, Papua. Is the applicant on the line? I'm sorry.
Yes, my name is Mark. Sorry, my name is Mark Hertzfeld with Design to Construct, representing COPS. We agree with everything that Papua has suggested to the Plan Commission, with the exception of the east elevation. Because the east elevation is so heavily screened, it's not visible from any of the roadways. It's you'd have to literally be on the outlot with the detention basin to even see that elevation. I understand the concern with having four-sided architecture when the building is visible to view, but because this elevation it will not be seen from any vantage point on the roadway, the right-of-way at all. It seemed unnecessary to go through the process to spend the additional money required to install a precast wall or a metal panel wall along that facade when it's not going to be visible at all. We'd like the Plan Commission to consider that when they're going to make a motion for approval today. Thank you.
Thank you. Question for staff. I have one to begin with. Well, it might not be visible, these metal walls from roadways. Would they be visible from adjoining private properties?
They would be visible from the south property. It's an existing multi-tenant building, and then go right way is also to the south. So it would be visible from the rear of those properties, but not to the east. The east is heavily screened, and again, there's that stormwater pond and extensive landscaping to the east.
And when you say they'd be visible from those properties, are they visible from public areas of those properties, or simply if you go to the back of a building?
If you were in the rear of the property, it would be visible.
And is there parking in the rear or other things that people would gravitate to?
Sure, Jack, if you zoom in to the multi-tenant building, west of Go Right Way. So I think the multi-tenant building has parking areas in the back. I don't know if it's publicly used or not, but that from that area, the rear of the building would be visible, as well as the loading docks, which are proposed in the south elevation.
But that isn't where, if I was going to visit that building, I would likely park. Is that correct?
Correct. You probably parked in the south parking lot facing Dundas.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Hertzfeld?
I'd like to just follow up on that. Pahua is correct. The side and back of our building will be visible from those two lots, but the lot directly south of us, the multi-tenant facility she was referring to, faces directly to the south facade of our building, which is 100% precast. It is our loading dock area and is the area that's going to be screened with some of the additional landscaping she had indicated. The only property to the south that would really have a view of that east property or that east boundary of our building would be the Right Way bus company, and the whole entire back portion of their lot, or 3/4 of their lot, is full of yellow buses. So I'm not so concerned with, I don't think that they're going to be very concerned with the view of that east side of our building. And the only people who would see it would be the drivers going to pick up the buses to take them out for their daily route.
Thank you. I think I saw Alderman Urban's hand up.
I was just looking at Google Maps here and kind of agreeing with the developer's view of things here. I don't think that east elevation is a major concern given the lay of the land, at least in my opinion.
Any other questions? Then we'll get to a motion, then we'll have discussion. Is there a motion of some sort? Now, then let's just go to the next item. Come on, somebody's got to have a motion. Commissioner Jim Schaefer.
I would move approval, subject to staff reviewing the east elevation and adding some other building material. So it isn't all metal panels. It doesn't even have to be 50%, but I think you should have something. Maybe wrap it around the corners or something. That's up to the applicant.
Is there a second?
And
Speak up, somebody. I can't. It's hard to see when the screen's
Second.
on. Okay, Commissioner Hawley. Discussion. Commissioner Stoker.
I guess I feel like we've been in this situation before where applicants have made a compelling argument that we shouldn't require four-sided architecture. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe we've ever made this exception. And I agree 100% with the applicant that this is a perfect situation to not require four-sided architecture. If anyone can correct me, have we made exceptions to this in the past? I'm a little worried about opening up Pandora's box. Obviously, I know we never make any exceptions on the residential side, which I would love someday to change that, but that's not for here and now.
Staff, can somebody answer Mr. Stoker's question?
I would say most of the times the exception has to do with an expansion. We've done that several times. I don't recall too many times where we've just allowed a straight metal panel on the back of a building because it's not visible to any other public area. We have done several where, you know, they contemplated an addition off the side yard and we allowed that, but I'm not aware of anything else other than that.
I have a follow-up question. Two, actually. One, do we have an ordinance that speaks to this? And two, why haven't there been exceptions made? Am I missing some sort of good policy argument?
Well, I believe the ordinance talks about generalities and gives the commission a lot of authority over decisions with regard to design. I would say if we get a little bit Pandora's box when we start going down what's visible and not visible and what's an important view shed and what's not. I think this just kind of takes that subjectivity out of everyone's hands, because I'm sure there's a lot of cases that can be made by some applicants that, well, nothing's behind me except, another building, or if it's trees, but that's not always maybe going to be that way in the future. So I think we always strive for at least some level of four-side architecture. It doesn't always have to be the same hierarchy as the front, but we still push for some design to that rear, because again, you never know what is going to actually ever happen in the back or to the side of a property.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Any people ready to vote on this? If so, please call the roll. What can I ask a question first? There was some provision that staff asked to have added. I don't remember what it was.
It was that rooftop screening will be required if units are visible once construction is complete.
Is that part of your motion, Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
And whoever seconded, Ms. Holly? Okay, that's what we're voting on. So we're voting on the staff's recommendations requiring some sort of architectural detail or material on is it the east elevation? The east elevation to be approved by staff, as well as the screening of mechanicals if in fact they're visible from a public space. Please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Hawley,
aye.
Commissioner Bach,
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer,
Aye.
Commissioner Lemke, Commissioner Stoker,
Aye.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Nervin,
Aye.
Mayor Work.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Hertzfeld, and to your clients. And if hopefully you can propose something along that east elevation that staff is agreeable to, so that you don't have to come back here. I presume you can work that out. The next item on our agenda, we have 3 successive items for school districts. We will take them up separately. The first is Donjas Bay School. That also, besides the site plan approval, electronic sign and fill permits, it also includes a rezoning recommendation of the Common Council, because for whatever reason, that property is not currently zoned IPS. The other 2 have everything but the rezoning recommendation. I understand Jack is handling these. We'll take them one at a time. Jack, a brief explanation.
Sure. Again, this is similar to some of the other projects we've seen from the school district. There's an addition going in the back end of the property. This one's roughly 30,000 square feet. This is for a gymnasium, some larger classrooms, and a larger cafeteria. Other changes to the site that are notable, they are again doing some work with regard to the parent pickup and drop off here in this location. And they're also, I think the most notable thing, and this was one of the email that was sent to the commissioners with regard to concern, they are adding a full bus exit on the east side of the building to remove the conflict between the cars and the buses, and then the bus parking will be in the back rear. Again, staff is supportive of the proposal. We did make a couple conditions of approval. One of them is that this area here, and I can kind of show you on the ortho photo, is adjacent to Whitman Place. Just a little concerned over the proximity to those units over there. So we are asking for some additional landscaping along that east property line. There is a bit of a landscape line on the Whitman Place property line, but there's a couple gaps in there. So we're asking to fill those in to help prevent any headlights from going onto that property. We're also clarifying that the lights along this path are limited to 20 feet, which is in our ordinance. There's some conflicting information in their plans. There's an issue with some landscape islands that have been removed from the original drawing. I can show you here. This is the 2020 drawing on your screen right now, and you can see in the parking lot, there's no landscape islands. But if we go back to 2010, you can see there was 5 islands in this location. Those were removed without approval from the city. We are asking that those be put back in their locations or adjusted for the parking lot changes that are being made. As you can tell from the ortho photo, the parking lot does not meet our shading requirement or our interior lot landscaping requirement. So we are asking that those be added back. As the mayor stated, this is a rezoning recommendation. This is zone residential. This is the only public school that we have that has that zoning. I assume it was just an oversight, maybe when all the other schools were switched over. So this will have to go to common council for approval. They're also proposing a electronic message sign. This is similar to what we've seen from some of the other ones that were in front of us. I'll pull up a picture of it with the matching base right here. So we're supportive of that. The only other issue that I just clarified in the report, they're asking for painting of the mechanical equipment as they did last week last month with the Stefan and Dodge Bay project or Lakeshore project. This case, we don't support the screening on the east elevation. I think you'll get some view of that mechanical equipment from Whitman Place. So we're recommending that still remain as a screening device. Other than that, we do recommend approval according to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there somebody here speaking on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, this is Robin Savola from Epstein Ewing Architects.
Thank you. Go ahead.
We also have a few others on the line for the district. Kyle Thompson is here. And I believe Ryan Birchbach from Kapoor.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, the district and EUA certainly have no objection to screening that east rooftop area and putting those pavement islands back into the paved area. We do have some things that we would like some clarification on. The landscape on the west side that Jack did just recently talk about along that bus lane, the buses come at earliest 8:50 in the morning and leave by 4:10 in the evening. So there is no bus traffic regularly through there in the evening or the morning hours before it is light. So we would like to be considered to not have to add that additional landscaping.
Thank you. Anything else from the applicant?
Yeah, we have the access. There was number 9 of the recommendations did talk about the acceleration, deceleration, and bypass lanes. We actually kind of want to discuss these at all of the schools, so we'll just start with this one. The reference standard is for new developments, so we're not. My interpretation was that it wouldn't specifically apply to this being an existing development. The ingress lane is actually as existing. We're not modifying that right now. Adding a deceleration lane to that would actually impact the neighbors on that side to the west. So we had a concern about that. This is a school zone, so it is a 20-mile-per-hour school zone. And we did have a traffic impact analysis done. TADI did run the report or analysis today regarding impact for the acceleration, deceleration, and bypass lanes. They found that they would not be meeting the standard to be required for those. I did send that report over to Jack, but that was honestly like a few minutes ago, so I don't expect him to have had a chance to review that yet, but we would like some further review on that, I guess. We have some concerns about the impacts, mostly to the neighbors to the east and to the west. If we had a bus, also acceleration lane coming out of the east side would indicate.
Would you prefer that this come back to the planning commission next month and have an opportunity for staff to review what you submitted and discuss that with you?
I mean, if possible, we would prefer a decision this round, but.
Oh, but we don't have the information. None of us on the call do. I don't know how we take that into consideration without having seen it before the meeting and had an opportunity to review and ask questions about it.
Understood. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to say, if you have other issues, maybe we should take these up one at a time. It does seem, add some complication to, if we've got 3 or 4 issues that aren't resolved between you and staff, maybe we should take them up one at a time. Or are those the only 2?
That was the last one for Dodges Bay.
So the 2 issues that you have is the landscaping along the one edge and the decel acceleration lanes. Is that correct?
And also the bypass lane recommendation. There was a comment on one of the other schools that if a traffic impact analysis was done and was not deemed necessary, then it would not be required. Would staff be amenable to just having that language? And then they could review the report?
Jack?
Well, thankfully, this is not my area of expertise. This is Kristen. I don't know if she's on the line or not.
Okay.
Ms.
Yes,
Lundin,
I'm
are you with
walking
us?
away from it.
What was that?
Yes. So yes, it was intended to provide the flight call. We amended the exhibit for the acceleration and deceleration and bypass lanes to include the trigger for the volume and number of turning movements. And so if they provided data to support that the project is below that threshold, then the bypass lanes would not be required.
But that's not in the recommendations as currently written, so we need to have that be part of a motion. Is that correct? Kristen?
Unfortunately, I can't pull up the condition right now. I thought I had written the flexibility in, but if I did not, I would not be opposed to writing it in.
So we'll add that to any motion we have. How does that sound? Well, if the commission wants to. So the other issue we have to discuss as a commission is the landscaping along the, is that the east property line?
Correct.
East property line. Other questions from the commission? Commissioner Becky Schaefer.
I was just looking at the public feedback that we had received earlier this afternoon and didn't know if we should try to address those 2 points.
If you'd like to, there are certainly, although, are they questions or are they comments? If they're comments, we'll get to them after a motion.
Let's get to them after the motion then, please. Thanks.
Okay. I mean, because we can always amend the motion. Well, if you want to, yeah, ask a question that's related to any other questions. Is there a motion? Oh,
Greg, I have a quick
Commissioner Bach.
question. Yes,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Greg Bach. Hey, Jack, just a question on all 3 of these schools, maybe, and I know we've talked about this before. On all of the parking lot lights, I'm assuming those are the LED lights, kind of like they have over at the hospital that shine down on the parking lots, those are. And then if you could give me a quick kind of, executive summary headlines on, are the schools, do they fall under conditional use permits or, are they completely separate? I know we talked about it briefly, but if you could just refresh my memory, it'd be great.
Sure. As far as the parking lot lights, there's not a requirement that they be LED, but they do have to meet our full cutoff requirements. Basically that there's no glare, they're flat typically. In this case, the ones that they are proposing do meet that requirement. In terms of the schools, other than Dodges Bay, all the other public schools in the city are permitted uses. This would be a conditional use, but after speaking with the schools and the fact that we are looking to modify our conditional use requirements in the residential zones and perhaps taking out schools, We just thought it would be more in line to remove or change the zoning on this to IPS so that they would be permitted. So this approval won't go into effect until the common council takes action on the rezoning.
So permitted and conditional. So let's say I'm just pulling out a church group wanted to come and have a church service at one of the schools and rent the school. That would be okay. They have a lot of leeway to do any of that kind of stuff under permitted use.
There's flexibility, yes, there. We have other schools rent out a lot of their facilities to different organizations, and we're pretty flexible with that. Under a conditional use, again, we typically, if that was a circumstance in a conditional use, I don't think we would require a conditional use amendment. The conditional use would come into play if there was some use that was, happening very late at night, very early in the morning. I mean, this is a school right now. It's been a school since the 60s. The neighborhood, I think, comes to expect a school being there. So I don't think we need to keep a conditional use on this property. It's been, regulated over the years, and everything has been relatively, functioning as a school. So other events can take place at schools. I don't see any of those events really having a negative impact.
Got it. Thank you.
I do have a question, Jack, with the addition of the, 5 landscape islands?
Yes.
With landscaping that would be planted, would these parking lots then meet at some point the shading requirement?
No, they still would be short. And we don't typically require existing deficiencies to be complied with unless they're doing a major reconstruction of that lot. And you'll see that with the next case with Oriole Lane. So in this case, since they're really not doing much to that parking lot other than, changing the pickup drop-off areas, we typically wouldn't require them to come in the compliance with that 10% and 30% shading. But in this case, since there was existing islands there, we just want them back. So at least they are contributing somewhat to those factors.
And are the islands as potentially constructed? Some of the islands that have been used and approved in the city are so narrow that, frankly, the opportunity to keep anything alive, any sort of tree, it's farcical to suggest that it actually will work. Will these be wide enough that they actually make a difference, or are we imposing a condition that simply makes it harder to plow, harder to navigate, and we'll end up with some stunted plants that will die?
Based on the photos, I have the photo off from 2010 when they were there. They appear to be pretty much about 9 feet in width and 2 parking lot lengths in length. So I think that a tree won't have an issue there. They do have lights in those islands right now, or they did, and they will have lights in there from the parking lot. So you're probably still looking at something a little bit more columnar or something a little bit more ornamental because you don't want to impact those lights. But the islands themselves were fairly decent size, and I wouldn't see any issue with trees growing in them.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Somebody. Okay. Well, I'll move approval, subject to staff's recommendations. With the modification that consistent with Director Lundin said, that to the extent that the traffic analysis doesn't mandate the excel, decel, or bypass, that staff in its discretion can waive that requirement. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Stoker. Discussion. Commissioner Becky Schaefer again.
So this is where I would come in and look at the email that we received. The first point was regarding the electronic sign in the school property and the light pollution. So maybe staff can just speak to it. My assumption is that it has to meet the cutoff requirements like any other light, and that there's some sort of standards for electronic signs. Is that an accurate assumption?
Yes, we have a fairly restrictive sign code when it comes to electronic message signs. They're only allowed to illuminate at a certain level. They can't flash, they can't animate. It has to be just lettering that is shown. They can only change once every, I believe it's every 30 seconds. So there's pretty rigid requirements in place right now. And on the screen, I'm kind of showing you where this area where that sign's going to be. As you can see across the street, it's basically an outlot of the subdivision. And they're really, our code does, limit what can be done within 100 feet of a residential property as what we saw on Dodges Bay or on Lakeshore. This one is actually pretty far away from any residential property. So it is pretty dark over there, so you'll see it. But again, we have a pretty strict requirement for what can be shown on those signs. So I don't see it being a negative to the area in terms of light pollution.
I recall we talked about that pretty extensively when we talked about Lumen Christi and their remodeling there. So yes. And then the other point that was raised was about the bus lane. And Mr. Newell sent this email and asked sort of why it was necessary. I'm not a Dodges Bay parent, but I am a parent at elementary, and I can speak to the amount of change that's probably happened. And since, well, this school was built in the 60s, my guess was there was a lot fewer parent drop-offs happening then, and I think it's only increased. And I know that our district administration at each building, as well as overall, would say the same. The amount of traffic from cars dropping off and picking up students has increased. This year aside, as sort of a weird year, it's increased exponentially from what the schools were designed to handle. So that's been a big concern for elementary parents for as long as I've been one. As far as a safety concern, I think that's why the separation of the bus lane on the other side of the school, separate entirely from the students walking out for car pickup, I think that's why it was suggested. When I look at where I think it is going to go along the east side of Dodges Bay on the screen, it looks like my screen won't allow me to zoom in for some reason, but it looks like there's already the existing trees. I think we talked about the potential for additional trees also on the east side towards Whitman Place, correct?
Yeah, so I have the ortho kind of showing the 2020 conditions. So basically you see this there's a access asphalt that goes around the building. This is where the drive aisle will come. The addition will be in this location here. It'll come around. Now there's 3 trees here, some larger mature trees here. Those will be coming down to make room for the road, as well as there's a stormwater pond going in this location as well. There are some trees you can see on the neighboring outlot along here. It cuts off me along here, but there are some gaps in there. And, I think, 410 on a winter night in December, I think they're still probably using headlights at that point. And it's going to be a visual difference for the people that live in Whitman Place. I think it's nice to have this buffer of outlot with the tennis court separating the actual dwelling units from the school. But I think this will be a significant change for their view shed in terms of seeing those buses in and out, as well as the lights. They're putting the road will be illuminated here, and there'll be full cutoff. There's no trespass of light onto the property based on the submittal by the applicant, but they'll still see light in this area. So we're just asking that we fill in some of these gaps in here with some evergreens to help protect that view shed a little bit.
Yes. And that was agreeable to, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, the architect, the representative from Epstein Ewan. And
well, that's where they disagreed with.
Yeah,
Well,
they'd like to not put those trees in.
I would
My
like.
motion would require them.
Okay. Okay. I thought you said on the west side but it was the east side, right? We're talking about the east side of the
East
building.
side, yes, east side.
I may have misspoken. He is correct.
Okay.
It was the side I was referring to.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're necessary. Okay, thank you.
Unless any other comments from Mr. Cohn, we typically don't call on people to comment after we've gone to a motion. But if somebody have a question from it, Mr. Cohen, what would you like to add?
I wasn't aware that we don't do it after the motion. I would have done it before the motion. I'm at Whitman Place. I'm newly on the board of directors.
Oh,
And
and we don't actually, I thought you were with the applicant. We have a pretty
No.
hard rule that people who want to talk need to register in advance.
Well, I just-
Go ahead, though.
okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, the question I have is there are a few trees on that east border. And the question I have is, anybody done a study as far as the noise factor for those buses going in and out for those poor people who live on that corner? Versus, or a berm along there?
Okay. Jack, can you address that?
No, I don't think I mean, the applicant was correct that there's going to be very little bus traffic throughout the day. It's going to be mostly mornings and afternoons. They are separated from that traffic with an outlet, as well as Charter Mall Road runs through there. So I don't know, I don't know who lives in there, but there may be buses going into the development already. So I don't think we would require any sort of noise analysis for school buses. I don't think we've ever done that in the past. I think we're just more concerned about the visual impact of those buses. I think if there were homes right abutting the back of that property, then maybe it'd be a different story. But I think the houses there are still far enough away where I don't think the noise will be as an issue as it could be in other circumstances.
Okay.
Comments, and we really are at the point where commissioners speak. Mr. Bach.
Yeah, just real quickly, regarding the electronic sign, and Mr. Newell's comment, I'm going to vote for the sign, but, just for the record, I'm not crazy about electronic signs. I think as soon as you put those signs out there, they're old technology, and people can find a lot of other things that are going on different ways on phones. And I just wish they'd put the extra money in cameras or some kind of thing like that. You can still make a really, really nice sign. That's my comment. Thank you.
Other comments? I would note, I like the electronic signs. I think it's a method for schools to give information to school families where they actually notice it, to let people know that they have a play or something else at the school that the public's invited to. I think that the few electronic signs we've had in the city have not been abused. They've been informative. They're not intrusive. And I think that, and we've limited them pretty drastically to churches and schools. And I think that, yeah, they can be a terrible technology if we didn't have rules that restricted how they could be used. But the way we've done it in this community has been, it's a lot cheaper and a lot better information than changeable letter signs, which many of these places had before, where the letters fall off and words are misspelled and people use upside down nines in order to make a letter B and all sorts of ridiculous other things. And it's actually less intrusive and looks good. So hearing no other comments, we have a motion and a second. The motion right now would require those few additional trees. But does allow for some flexibility with staff. And if staff becomes difficult and doesn't agree with what you're doing as far as the ingress, egress, and excuse me, the 3 traffic issues, you can always come back to us. So we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Hawley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bach,
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer,
Aye.
Commissioner Lemke,
Rick?
Commissioner Lemke, yes. Got it. Commissioner Stoker, Commissioner Becky Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Nerben,
Aye.
Mayor Work.
Aye. The next item is a very similar item. It's for Oriole Lane School, which people know it's on 12850 Oriole Lane. Jack?
Yeah, this is a similar request. This one, there's actually 3 separate additions going on the property. As you can see, I'll use the highlighter here. There's one in the back area here. That'll include a gymnasium and a larger cafeteria. There's also the one located here and then one here at the front of the property. Again, staff's supportive of the design of the buildings. This is where a case where I was mentioning this parking lot with the new basically cul-de-sac for the bus turnaround. This is a new parking area. So here they don't show any landscaping in this area. We are requesting they meet the 10% interior lot and the 30% shading requirements. They also show an illumination plan that shows, I think it's exceeding our 2-foot candle requirements. So we're just asking for that to be in compliance. There is a chain link dumpster proposed in this area here to replace an existing one, I believe. We typically require at least the 3 sidewalls to match the materials of the building. So we're asking for that to match the brick that's showing on the building. And then in terms of the site, they're also changing, again, the pickup drop-off area in accordance with their traffic study. I'll zoom out just a little bit. They're also making a change where there's better access to Highland Road. Highland Road. They're adding additional lanes to help with traffic in and out of the school. So we're supportive of all the different changes here. This one also has an electronic message sign similar to the other 2. The only other issue with that I address is there's some lighting in this parking lot here. There's lighting that is basically shining across. So I think it was meant to try to cover as much space as possible. It's not a cutoff light. It's on an angle. So we're just asking for that lighting to be either removed or to be made in compliance with our lighting code. Other than that, staff is supportive of the request according to the conditions in the report.
The applicant, Miss, and I'm sorry, didn't catch your last name and I can't see it.
That's right, Robin Savola with Epstein Ewing Architects.
Ms. Lola, comments, questions?
Yeah, I have 3 items I'd like to discuss. Do you want to do them individually or?
Well, go start with one and we'll see.
Okay. The first one would be the dumpster enclosure. The zoning requirement does say that it does need to be enclosed, and we are proposing a black vinyl coated slat chain link fence. So it would have a visual barrier. We would prefer, not for cost reasons and, to do the brick block with a foundation wall. Right now, the existing fence is a chain link fence. It is 600 feet from the road, so you do have to be on the property to really see it. The district wants to be, respectful of the taxpayer dollars, and just make sure that we are meeting the zoning requirements, but not exceeding.
Why don't you go through the other ones? That'll be something we can address.
Okay. Then I have the parking lot that Jack was referring to, that new area. This is a clarification of how it's intended to be used. There was an error that we didn't include vehicle parking slots, stalls on there. Those will be removed when it is submitted to the city for engineering review. The purpose of this lot is purely for bus turnaround. And also it will be used for physical education, outdoor activities during the school day. There are gates that will close it off so no cars can go back there and park. The hope is that for safety reasons, since it is a play area and a bus turnaround only, that will be what the end design is, that we can not have the landscape islands which can obstruct view with kids going out to buses and bus traffic going in and out.
Your
And
third item?
my third one is again, the access to this site with the acceleration, deceleration, and bypass lane. We would just ask for the same sort of language that with a traffic impact analysis, if it doesn't meet the requirements, we would not be required to do it.
Let me take up the last one and ask Ms. Lundin, are you fine with that same language on this item?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So Jack, can you address the other two items, please?
Sure, if that parking lot is not gonna be constructed as shown, then I don't have a concern over what they're trying to do there. Especially if it's gonna be a play area. We have that in other schools where they try to keep, and that's one of the reasons I think some of these other schools don't meet the requirements, is because they used to use those parking lots as play areas. So I don't have an issue with that. As far as the dumpster enclosure, again, we don't typically allow that on our developments. The chain link tends to get beat up over time. The slats kind of fall apart. And so it's been a practice that's long before I've been here that we required that. If the commission feels that they're open to allowing that, then I would ask to be some screening provided to the south of that enclosure to kind of block its view a little bit from the public right away. I'm looking at the landscape plan. I don't think there's anything shown in that area, so.
Questions by the commissioners for staff? Mr. Bach.
Just a question on that, the turn lane off of Highland Road into the school that was proposed, so that queuing area. I know right now this just may be due to COVID, but sometimes that traffic in the afternoon is backed up almost to the farmhouse. How is that queuing or that turning lane going to go, or how long is it? Just some questions on that.
Kristen?
Like, I guess that's what, I haven't seen what they said they submitted, so I can't speak to that, but that's what they're asking. If the traffic impact analysis indicates that they don't need, that they wouldn't be required to do.
It's pretty, I mean, again, it may be due to COVID right now, but it's on a pretty daily basis. I mean, you've got sometimes 10, 15 cars backed up there on Highland trying to wait in the afternoon to pick up.
Anything else, Mr. Bach?
Nope, that's it.
As the applicant, am I allowed to address?
Yeah, you may.
There are some improvements along here. There are, instead of a single in and a single out, there are now going to be 2 ins. So it will increase the, ability for cars to stack up on the property. There are also 2 drop-off lanes. So those lanes go all the way from the Highland Road up to the drop-off area. So it will allow more cars to stay on school property and be off of the road.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer, I think, had her hand up. Then you
I was going to mention the same thing. I live this one every day, and and the maintenance and grounds supervisor at Oriole is a friend of mine, and so we've talked about this at length. I think it will be. I understand what you're saying, Greg, because it's causing some dangerous situations where people are going then on the what's the word I want? Like outside and around, and it's very dicey right now. I think the way that it's going to be updated, you'll be able to allow twice as many cars on the property, and Oriole is lucky to have that long lead up as opposed to like Wilson, which has a really short one. I assume we're going to be talking about that shortly, but I think it will make a big difference.
Mr. Alderman Urban.
I had a question about the parking lot lighting that's for the play area. Is it, and this is a question maybe both for staff and the applicant, is it reasonable to put a motion sensor on that so the light is only being displayed when someone's actively using the space and not just blasted on all the time for everyone?
I guess I'll let the applicant speak first on that. I think that's a good, if it's not going to be used, I think it should be not lit until it's needed, but I'll let the applicant give her opinion on that one first, I guess.
And actually, I will ask for Kyle Thompson from the district to weigh in a little bit on this one. There are, timing scenarios that you can do so that it is certain things are lit during certain times of the day.
Yeah, I agree. So this is Kyle Thompson with the district, and the way we light our property, we really want to be good neighbors. So I love the idea of doing some type of motion step lighting. Maybe what we can do is we can look with our lighting representatives and get a 50-100% type thing. So if there's no motion, the lights drop down. If we get some motion on there, the lights come up to full power. I know we still want to have some deterrence from any bad stuff happening around the school. We kind of are in the middle of 20 acres. So we want to get some deterrent around there, but I love the idea of kicking that light level down, and we will explore that.
Okay, thanks. I think it's probably not enough
Other
info to require one, but I'm glad you're willing to look into it.
Other questions? Is there a motion?
I move to accept with staff recommendations. And what else do we have? The change that Ms. Lundin made, the language change in the acceleration, deacceleration lanes, and some kind of, I believe we talked about some kind of screening for the garbage dumpster that screened it based on staff recommendations. Did I miss anything?
Well, that is one of the recommendations already. It's a question of, is the material that staff is requiring, the applicant is asking to modify the requirement. Staff wants it in, I assume it's brick. And which is what typically would be required. So I'm not sure what you're moving on that, but either consistent with staff's recommendations, or are you asking for some sort of modification?
I'll stick with recommendations with the brick that staff recommended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion? Commissioner Schaefer. Becky Schaefer. Can't hear you, you're muted.
That's helpful. Ms. Savola, I was trying to make sure I was pronouncing your name correctly, so I was trying to highlight you. You had mentioned, so the traffic study and the acceleration deceleration lane, the enclosure, and then the third question that you had raised was relating to the bus cul-de-sac and I think landscaping or I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what your question was around that, but I'm not sure that was addressed in the.
Oh, in the motion. They're saying since there will not be parking along that lane, that landscape islands not be required since there won't be any parking there anyhow. Is that consistent, Mr. Bach, with your motion?
Yes, it is.
So that it would only be required if parking is going to be along that lane. I believe Commissioner Schaefer Jim Schaefer seconded. Is that acceptable, Jim Schaefer?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So the only discussion topic really might be the dumpster. Anybody want to address that? Commissioner Stoker.
We give them the option to keep their chain link fence and acceptable screening per staff, or go with staff's recommendation.
Is that an amendment?
That would be my amendment.
Is there a second? Hearing none.
I'll second. If I can clarify Commissioner Stoker's intent, landscaping screening in lieu of brick.
Yeah, so my motion would be, if they go with the chain link fence, they're requesting that, then they'd have to get acceptance of a landscape plan from staff, or they can ixnay the landscaping and go with the way it's currently written per staff recommendations.
Okay, I'll still second. I thought that's what you meant.
Okay, we're discussing the amendment only at this point. I frankly, this somewhat reminds me of the item we had earlier with the back you can't see. And I have some sympathy for the applicant's request. Isn't there a middle ground, Jack? I mean, I know some communities require, and I was involved in building a building in Grafton where they built a very nice wood enclosure, which is a whole lot nicer than a chain link fence, and they had some landscaping, but is nowhere near as expensive as doing a brick enclosure. Is there any middle ground to?
Yeah, I mean, we have in other circumstances have, I think, allowed other materials other than the primary material on the building, but usually there's something cohesive with the building.
Well, they use the same color on the wood enclosure.
Yeah, I mean, if they did something where it was painted to match the building, you know, we haven't had a lot of success with like plastic painted. That seems to break a lot. The wood is definitely preferable to chain link. That again, we get a lot of site visits after the fact where those get banged into by the dumpsters and they look in bad shape pretty quickly. So I would say, yeah, wood, or I mean, if they're open to some other material other than brick that can be consistent with the building, you know, even if it's something that matches the metal wall panel on the building somewhere, we'd be open to that as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be brick as long as it architecturally is compatible with the building.
I think the acceptable of that.
I would amend my motion, Mayor, to essentially a staff approval of an alternate material, or I'd still give them the option if they want to go chain link that they'd have to have full screening, which when it's all said and done, the cost may end up, you know, it may not be that favorable to them anyway.
Is that your second, Mr. Alderman Urban?
Agreed.
Okay. Further discussion on the amendment. Please call the roll on the amendment only.
Amendment. Commissioner Hawley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bach,
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer,
Aye.
Commissioner Lemke, Commissioner Stoker, Commissioner Becky Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Nervin,
Aye.
Mayor Worth.
Aye. We have the main motion in front of us. It doesn't sound like there's any controversy. So all in favor of the main motion, say as amended, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Our third and final school, and this one is Wilson School, 22,300 square foot addition, building site plan amendment, electronic sign and fill permit. Jack?
Yeah, this is probably the most significant change to the site to deal with some of the traffic issues that have been going on there for a while. And this is also one where we have one request of a building change that we didn't have in any of the other schools. So first thing I put up on the screen is a rendering of the building. This shows the gymnasium addition. This is basically looking at it from the north to the south. In this case, they added this little bump out mechanical room, storage room. This is shown in all metal clad. Staff is not supportive of this as all metal clad. There's really nothing else on the building that has just straight metal. As you can see with the gymnasium, they did a nice job of adding some metal accents to break up this large wall. Staff would be supportive of that type of treatment on this little addition as well. But we do not support just the full straight metal panel architecture. In terms of the site, let me get to that. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So like I said, this is probably the most significant change. The way they're doing this now is that traffic is going to be routed. Let me get my drawing tool out here. Basically, the traffic for drop-offs is going to be routed down Stephen through this existing parking lot, then through here to 2 lanes to drop off, and then exiting out through on Bunch Rock. I think this speaking from experience as a parent, I think this is be a tremendous improvement to the situation that's out there. It'll also close off, I believe, at least 1 or 2 of the drive aisles that are closest to this intersection. So we're supportive of the change. The TIA, I believe, was also supportive of the design that they're showing here to help with the congestion on both Stephen and Bunch Rock. This one will require a little opening here to the back playground area for buses. There's a line of trees here. I did ask Mike to go out and check. They're not specimen trees, and then some are actually in some poor shape, so no issue with that. They will be lighting this parking lot as part of the proposal. With that, we recommend the 2-foot candle requirement as typical for our parking lots. There is another chain link fence in this location here, so I think we'll have the same discussion as we did at the last item. Other than that, there's an electronic message sign that's going on Bunch Rock here. Same type of design as the ones we saw in the 2 previous schools, so we're supportive of that. So overall, we're supportive of the proposal according to the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Ms. Savola, I'm assuming you want the same language about the ingress egress or the turn lanes, and I'm assuming that you have the same concern about the dumpster.
Yes.
Is there other comments?
There's 2 other comments I just want to get some clarification on. That exterior image that Jack was showing, there is actually a precast base on that metal panel portion of the building that goes up to 3'4". So essentially the reasoning behind that is we did want to, we are tying into the existing materials on most, that for the majority of the building that's being added. We do want to just point out that this gymnasium is being constructed with precast backup panels. That does actually require that it is used with a thin brick. So while the existing school has like a striated brick, like a textured brick onto it, these kind of deep grooves that go vertically on that brick, we can't actually do that on the precast panel. The colors are from the same blend as the existing, but you can't actually get that striation. So part of the reason for this different material is to sort of separate the similar but not the same exact bricks from the gymnasium to the existing building and the classroom addition, which is on the other side of that, which does have a brick that would match the existing. So it's
and your other, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That was just it. So it really is just sort of an aesthetic thing that it was an intentional decision. It wasn't specifically a cost savings or a back of the building scenario. It was an intentional decision for that reasoning. As you mentioned, the dumpster, the one thing I did want to ask, that there was a recommendation, number 8, that I think might have been a copy over from a different Memorial Lane, because it did reference Highland Road. It talked about a boulevard, so I'd just like some clarification from staff if there was some sort of boulevard entrance requirement at this school, or if that was a simple carryover from a previous.
I think that was probably one of Kristen's carryovers.
Okay. So I guess I would, obviously assume that would not apply.
Kristen, I'm assuming you're on the phone somewhere.
Yeah, Jack. Although I'll take it if Jack's gonna take all mine from now on too. But yes, that was an incidental carryover, so that was intended just for the Oriole Lane School.
So I'm assuming the traffic study issue is the same as the other 2, and you're fine with deleting item 8?
Correct. I'm fine with the TIA being relied upon for XL, decel, and bypass, and yes, for the elimination of the duplicate item.
Okay. So the big issue that the commission needs to discuss is the architecture of that smaller metal building. Commissioner Schaefer, Jim Schaefer.
Yes, I have a question regarding the brick. This is thin brick, so that's a very thin brick, 1/2 inch or so. And it's the same color, but it doesn't have the vertical striations that the original brick does. Is there mortar in connection with that, or are they just stuck together?
You see the precast essentially color in between, and we're picking a precast color that is as closely possible to the existing mortar. So it will have the appearance of a mortar look to it, but it's not.
That's behind the brick.
The precast does come out into the joints. There are joints actually in the brick. They're not.
It does come into the joints, and it'll match the mortar color.
Yes, we'll be picking one that is close as possible to match.
I guess in looking at those metal panels, I really would like to see more brick in there. I don't know what, is that a masonry building or is it steel or what is it? That little.
This portion, the addition does have some masonry backup and some stud backup. There is some masonry over in this area for the backup, and then it is precast base that will match the
I
existing.
can see the precast base. I guess I would like to see a little masonry on there, some brick. Those metal panels seem to stand out so much. Maybe it's just the renderings, but I think if you did it on the corners, around the doors, or something that would improve the look of that, I'd prefer that. Other than that, I think it's a fine design.
Okay.
Is there a motion somewhere? Commissioner Becky Schaefer, oh, go ahead, Jim Schaefer.
Are you talking to me or are you talking to Becky?
Well, I wasn't sure if her hand was up and then you started talking. So go ahead, Jim. You were still on.
Okay, yeah, I would move approval based on resubmittal showing some masonry around that mechanical equipment room.
And
Other than that,
I'm assuming we'll have the same dumpster language as the last application, the same language regarding the traffic study and the removal of item 8 from the staff.
That's correct.
Recommendations.
That's
Is there
correct.
a second to the motion?
I second.
Becky Schaefer, I'll second.
Okay, we've
We'll
got
go
a
second.
couple of seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Or somebody? No, I thought I heard somebody. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. The next item is residents at Foxtown. I believe this is Director Lundin.
Sorry, I'm shuffling everything around here. Yes, the applicant has requested a further amendment to the development agreement. I went through and outlined what those changes are in track changes so that the Planning Commission could otherwise see what is being requested. The requests with respect to the asphalt and trees and sidewalk have previously been discussed and recommended for denial. So we are recommending no further amendments to that. The exception that we are accepting to consider is with respect to grading. We have done this in other for other developments as well, where we allow for an interim grading plan. It's just not how the developer originally presented it. So we are amenable to a development agreement amendment to allow for there to be an interim grading plan that would be adjusted as the homes are actually constructed.
Thank you. Mr. Zapchak, I'm assuming you're here to talk on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, can you hear me, Mayor?
Can hear you fine.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, first I have to say, we've come back for many amendments, and I think mainly because the first development agreement came forward from Bridget, which was a generic amendment, I'm sorry, development agreement, and which was tailored for primarily a typical subdivision that we've done in the past in Mequon. And this project is totally different than anything we've done before in Mequon. I mean, there's no addressing alleys or, I mean, we're talking about lots that are 32 feet wide, maybe 90 feet long. Just about the size of some of the houses we've built. And so we've had to come back. I think this is our fifth amendment. And I applaud especially Kristen, because I think has done a great job in trying to address these issues. But some of the things, and you know, I read the report and I totally disagree with her. Like sidewalks, she's suggesting that we put sidewalks in. And can I ask a simple question? How many of the commissioners have been to the site within the last 2 weeks, maybe? I'm talking about Foxtown site. Thank you, John. Anybody else? No. So, I mean, right there, I would be, I don't want to sound out of line, but how could you vote on something if you haven't been to the site, if you don't know what you're voting on? But number one, sidewalks. Kristen is suggesting that we put sidewalks on, and if you haven't been to the site, there's 3 rows. We're doing 9 houses on 2 rows, 5 houses on 1 row to the south. The sidewalks are totally going to get broken during construction. I mean, if you're talking about a lot that is 30-some feet wide, there's no room to do the construction without damaging the sidewalks. And I agree with Kristen. She's suggesting that, okay, if every time you build a house and put a sidewalk down, they're all going to look different. But we have suggested that once we finish a row of houses, that we would put a row of sidewalks down, because who's going to walk there? Quite honestly, if you go to the site, nobody's going to walk there. With respect to the grading and erosion, and I understand that completely, that if you have a typical subdivision and you disturb the soil, you have to vegetate. Otherwise, you have erosion. If you go to Foxtown, you'll see that these 3 lines of lots that we're going to be building on are all below grade. When I say below grade, they're lower than the curb and gutter. So we could have a major storm. There's not going to be any erosion. And Kristen, you may disagree with that. I don't know. The last issue has to do with the last layer of asphalt. Right now, the asphalt looks phenomenal. quite honestly, I've talked to the people that put it down, and they said it really looks great. So we have to lay another layer, I think they call it a lift of asphalt. But I think the city's concern is, well, you know, Lakeside goes out of business. Well, you know, we want this done before we give the final plat. I told Kristen I would be willing to put, and I think the requirement is 125% of the cost of the land. I would be willing to put 150% of what that cost would be. Because when this subdivision is done, I want it to be perfect. And we will not be able to lay, I shouldn't say that, but there's going to be, if we put the final layer of asphalt down before we build all these houses, it's not going to be perfect. And we're have to go back there and fix it. And I just don't understand what the rationale is to finish all the asphalt if you don't, unless you think we're not going to finish the job. So anyway, that's my position.
Thank you. Ms. Lundin, any response? You don't need to. Commissioners. Commissioner Schaefer.
I'm sorry, are we speaking, I feel like we reversed two items. Is that correct?
Well, no,
I thought that this were we not supposed to be on the brewery item? I think Mr. Zabdick was speaking specifically to the residences.
The residences are the first, or item 3F on the agenda. Foxtown Brewery is 3G. Mr. Zabchek is speaking to the right item.
My packet is the opposite. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened, but the packet that I had has the opposite.
The packet had them in the wrong order, but the agenda on the front of the packet has them in this order, and we need to follow the agenda, not the order that they're in the materials.
Just clarifying, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions by commissioners before we have a motion? We can have a discussion after the motion if you want. Is there a motion? Somebody. Or discussion. Alderman, Commissioner Bach.
I guess I just need from Miss Kristen Lundin the response to those issues that came up. I mean, I just wanted some clarification on where staff stands on the issues that were raised.
Well, I reacted to the proposal that was given that was to install the sidewalk with each individual home. We do not support or advocate for that because we have concerns that over time with freeze thaw that would become a tripping hazard, and it would certainly all look different if they only put the 2 pieces of sidewalk in with each individual home. So we are not supportive of that modification, but the request wasn't to install it by the block. With respect to asphalt, it is our standard requirement to require final asphalt prior to final plat. We already previously made exceptions for certain streets based upon this construction to allow for essentially the alley sides to remain just on binder course until the project was completed. They're now asking for no asphalt at all until either 100% or that 2-year trigger. And we are not supportive of that for a number of reasons, including which it's not fair to those residents up to that 100%, not to be on a fully paved road. And we may just have to agree to disagree on how construction traffic acts on asphalt, but asphalt at full strength generally supports construction traffic better than that just on a single binder course. The stabilization is an ordinance requirement. Our ordinance requires that it be stabilized within 7 days.
Mayor, can I make a comment, or is
Certainly. Go ahead.
First of all, the ordinance applies to prior subdivisions, traditional subdivisions where there is erosion that occurs. There will be no erosion. with our project. Number two, with respect to the road is the current road, which is just the binder course, is probably, quite honestly, it's better than the road that's in front of my house. And so I don't see that as an issue. And I wish I can explain this to you. You know, we're trying to put a development agreement together that is tailored for a traditional Mequon development. And this is not a traditional development. And, you know, we need some flexibility here. And, you know, we're looking at, I mean, Lakeside's been around for a while, and we're not going to walk away and not do what we said we were going to, or what we're obligated to do. And as I said, I would be willing to escrow whatever it costs to finish it out, but I don't want to put roads in and do all the landscaping. You know, this is a good example. The landscaping plan suggests that we plant all the trees. Now, these trees are like 8 feet apart from each house. My excavator is going to tell me the trees are going to fall in the hole. So we literally had to take these trees and move them off-site and plant them temporarily to accommodate the development agreement. And it just, honestly, it makes no sense. And I just wish that we could work together on this. And I honestly, I appreciate the fact that all of the commissioners are doing this pro bono, but why don't you go out there and look at the site and see what I'm talking about? And I suggest that I can't do this, it's up to you guys, but why don't we table this and go out there, look at the site, and then make a decision? Because I have an opportunity to build 6 homes before we get final plat. And I plan on starting 2 more homes next month, because we're getting very, very positive response to this project. So I would suggest go out there, take a look before you make a decision on the information you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? You can bring a motion to approve, to deny, to do something else, or to table. Is there a motion of some sort? Commissioner Stoker.
Having heard a request from the applicant, I will motion to table this until we all have time to go out and look at this project.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. A motion to table is not debatable. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Was there a no? I thought I heard a no. I think it was unanimous. The ayes have it. The next item, Foxtown Brewery for a patio expansion along Mequon Road. I believe that Jack is going to talk to us about this.
Yes, I was gonna look at the ortho, but it looks like it's older version. So, so basically, the applicant is requesting a patio extension to the west of the existing brewery. I have the site plan up and on the screen right now. Just a little background. When the original brewery design was approved, this area was kind of still up in the air on what was going to be done with it. So at the time, we just basically left it as green space. And now I believe partially because of the pandemic and this desire to have more outdoor seating, the applicants come back with a plan to show outdoor seating area with a seat wall and room up to 50 spaces for outdoor dining. Overall, we're supportive of the seating and the location of it. I guess we just have some concerns about the aesthetic of it as well as the sign request, which I'll get to in a second. So basically, the seat wall itself, one of the concerns is from staff is that this is on a fairly major entryway into the town center. And we want to see some incorporation with the town center, some of our designs of the town center, including the new gateway feature. I mean, at one point we asked them if a curved wall may be something they'd look at doing. I know they didn't want to do that because of cost, which we totally understand. So we're just looking for some consistency, either adding some additional wood. There's some wood material on the actual brewery that you see on our gateway feature. There's the black wrought iron that we've been using all throughout town center, and some other different patterns that we could look at in terms of trying to match the town center's overall design that we're trying to see throughout the whole town center. So we don't want to hold them up in terms of the project. I know they want to get going with footing, so we're okay with approving it on the condition that the footings can get started, but we still want to try to work out some design details with regard to that seat wall, which I'll show you a rendering of it here. That's 380. So basically here, so this is the view of it from the corner of Mequon and Buntrock. So, and we had some conversation with them recently. We just couldn't get anything established prior to the meeting, but I think they understood that what they're creating here is more internal focused versus external focused. And this is such a prominent corner. We want to try to incorporate some of those elements of our town center to make this more of a, not more of an external, but have some external focus on it, not just an internal focus for them. The other request is for us is sign on the wall, a Foxtown sign. Now this is treated as a freestanding sign. It will require a waiver because it is too close to the property line. Staff, again, we're supportive of something going on here, but again, we feel there's an existing sign as you see on the building. I think this sign is somewhat redundant. We also are concerned that this is going to look at the neighborhood as a whole as being Foxtown and then not more of a town center message. So we're open to looking at different options with regard to that sign, and maybe we can get our logo incorporated in that, or that could have a different a statement or message to it. But we're just concerned that that kind of sets the tone as you're coming down Mequon Road, that this is part of the Foxtown and not Mequon's town center. So we've had conversations. We've worked real well with them in the past. It sounded like from our last conversation they were open to having a discussion. So what we're going to recommend is approval of the site plan with this ability to work with staff on the design of that wall, and then we're asking to table that sign request and bring that back at a later meeting to kind of flush out some ideas we had with regard to making that more about the town center and not just specific to Foxtown. Again, with going forward, this shouldn't hold them up at all. This is going to take some time to build, so I think we do have some time with regard to that sign. But we want to keep them moving along, and if they want to get footings in there and start going, I assume they want to get this open right when the warm weather hits, so we don't want to hold them up on that as well. So we're supportive of again the project as a whole. There are also some other requirements in there. Our typical requirements for the string lighting, you have to meet the 70 lumens per bulb and can't flash or rotate. There's some other landscaping requirements in there to match our town center palette in terms of our plantings. And then there's a condition from the engineering department with regard to the scuppers and causing an icing issue on the wall. So overall, we do recommend, again, we recommend approval of the site plan, the building site plan amendment, but we recommend tabling of that sign waiver to a later meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nyman, I see that you're here. Are you speaking, or is there somebody else who's going to speak on behalf of the applicant, or?
Yes, John, Mayor. Steve Smith, the Steve Perry Smith Architects. With me, is Tom Neiman and Eric Nessif from my office. I just wanted to address the signage aspect. I know that's being tabled, but I at least want to give you our perspective on that.
We've always looked at, well, I'll call the bookends of the Foxtown development itself, being these two corners, one, the corner here at Bunt Rock, and the other corner which we submitted as part of Building D. What we were attempting to do here was actually brand our project, which is called Foxtown. It's not a building sign, it's actually a project monument or project identification sign. And not that we're opposed to having a Mequon Town Center logo incorporated within that, but this isn't, I know Jack said it's redundant to the brewery sign, but the sign that's on the brewery building is in fact a building identification sign, while this is meant to identify Foxtown, which is probably a $50 or $60 million investment by Tom and his partners. And so we feel it's important to identify that because everything is playing off of that. And so we just want to mention that. Secondly, there was a comment about not wanting to do the curve because of cost. That was not the reason, actually. The reason was for several reasons, but first of which, we don't have any curved elements in the project at all. I think it'd be misguided to try and match the new Mequon Thiensville sign, gateway sign there. That is on the river. It's two major roads coming together, and it takes you someplace. I think this is Bunt Rock, which is really takes you to the school, but it's not as major of an intersection. And so again, we resisted having a curve on it. Architecturally, we're trying to tie it into the signage walls that we have on Building B, which are currently up. You can see them, which essentially are masonry piers with stone in between. We're carrying that same theme over to here. Similarly with the festoon lighting, we're carrying the individual pole lights with the festoon lighting that we have currently on Building B and proposed, and I believe approved for Building D. So what we're trying to do is, and the good news is this is going to activate both corners of Foxtown itself with having activity and people on these corners, which will really energize the project and show that activity to the community. So again, I just want to give you where we're coming from in the design architecturally. We do in fact have some fencing, but part of the issue, the reason why we went with such a masonry wall here, and we call it a seat wall or whatever you want to call it, was to provide some buffering from it's a busy corner and Mequon's busy there, and provide some physical protection from the road. And so the idea of maybe throwing in some wrought iron fencing there, not that we wouldn't want to do it, but it's just not a real clean look when you look at where the piers are. And the last thing, the curve, if we're trying to keep from hitting, there's underground utilities that are right at that corner. So we've kept it all inboard of those utilities, and maybe that's the cost that Jack was talking about, but we were just trying to work within the utilities so we don't have footings on top of water mains. And so again, it's with that idea and concept that we're presenting this for the Plan Commission approval. And you know, in Tom's opinion, if we just take the signage off, maybe, you know, we just won't do it. I think it'd be nice to identify Foxtown as Foxtown. It's part of the neighborhood. Not that we can't. We have another wall facing Mequon that we couldn't, if the city had a logo for Mequon Town Center, that we can incorporate that. We're not opposed to that, but we want to let Foxtown be Foxtown. You have Spur 16. They have their own identification. I don't think they have any reference right now to the town center. We're all part of the town center, and again, we're not opposed to incorporating some of that, but we would like to see Foxtown identified. And that's my 2 cents on it. So,
thank you. Questions from the commissioners to either staff or to the developer? Anybody? Or a motion? Commissioner Jim Schaefer.
I have a question for the applicant regarding the stone. In the rendering, it shows that it's sort of a rubble stone, fieldstone foundation for the existing building. And then it also shows that between the piers and the walls. But on the small schematic patio elevation, it shows random ashlar or Lannon stone between the piers. And I wondered, is it going to be random ashlar stone or some kind of fieldstone, rubble stone, or what do you have in mind?
I believe it would be random ashlar. That's the stone we've used throughout the development. That's
Okay.
what we did on building. I think it was just an error. It may have been when he was first rendering and he was tying it in, but it'd be the intent. I apologize for the confusion on that. It'd be our intent to have that be more of a random ashlar. It's a cleaner, crisper look. It would tie into what's on basically on building B, which is adjacent to the brewery. And it's what we've used on the other building, E buildings. And so it'd be our recommendation that we use that. And then we're incorporating the cream city on the piers. We use the red brick and the two brick that you see in Mequon are basically either a cream city or kind of a reddish brick with some variation in it and some accents. And that's what we use in building B. And we have basically that random ashlar in between the piers. And so we would be doing essentially the same thing, but using the cream city on this building. And then we're recalling that same cream city on building D, the other corner. And if you look at our submittal for building D, it relates to this sign as well. And again, we could incorporate a Mequon Town Center logo, or once that's developed, I'm not sure if there is one now or not, Jack, but we could look at that and see how that all ties in. But we're just showing the Foxtown project identification on this clip corner portion because it best addresses the street from that corner.
Okay, that answered my question. I would support the materials as he has specified.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Stoker.
I'm having some technical difficulties, and based on the size of the PDF, I cannot get it open in time before I ask this question, so this may be a dumb question. Is the section of the seat wall that actually holds the Foxtown as we're seeing it in the rendering, is it the same height as the rest of the sections? It's hard to tell from the rendering. It almost appears like it's taller.
No, it actually is taller. We raised it up. You see some planting there. We need to raise it up a little bit. We didn't want to close off, have it being so enclosed from the street, but we wanted to actually identify this corner and not have it be all the same height. That gets a little static. So we raised the signage portion of it higher. I think, what is it, Eric? Do you know, about 16 inches, or it's taller, not by a lot, but we wanted to articulate that portion and to give a little bit, again, more buffering from that corner.
And I guess, and I asked that question because it's not obtrusive to me, but it does make it feel more like a sign. And I would love to see it say Foxtown at Town Center or at Mequon Town Center. I think that would be a very cool concept, just my opinion.
We talked about that earlier, and again, whether it's you recall the name or there's a logo that you guys developed as part of the town center, we're not opposed to that, but we do want to have the project be identified as Foxtown. It's going to be a destination.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thought we had with it. This is higher in this section, and it's higher than what's on building B next door. And so the prominence of it was what raised this concern, and that was one of our suggestions too. Can we incorporate Foxtown at Town Center, something like that? I mean, because technically, to be a sign, a legal sign, it has to announce the name of the business, not necessarily the area. So there's a little bit even a concern with just saying it's Foxtown. It's similar to like an off-premise sign in a sense, that it's not advertising just the brewery. So again, that's why we're trying to work. Unfortunately, the applicant was Berghammer, who was their construction guy, and I know there's, Greg Thompson's involved and Stephen Perry Smith. So we had a lot of different layers to try to get through. We just could not come up with something until before the meeting. But again, they've always done really good work so far. Everything's been going great. We didn't want to hold them up, but we still wanted some opportunity to try to incorporate some of these features into this nice looking development.
Thank you.
Mine's a question, but it's also a comment. And I've kind of going back and forth on this. First of all, I love your development. Thank you for putting it Mequon, all good things. But I'm trying to envision, not just in Mequon, but elsewhere, where you have I mean, I understand the concept of subdivision signs for residential subdivisions. I understand the concept of a standalone business park saying this is a standalone business park. But are you a separate neighborhood or are you part of a neighborhood? The neighborhood being Mequon Town Center. And I'm wondering what the benefit is. I mean, I don't see a sign that says, maybe I'm missing it, maybe I'm forgetting, I didn't go over to drive and look at this. Here's a sign that says this is Spur 16. There is one?
Yes.
There is a sign that says
Jack?
Spur 16.
The freestanding, the tall sign we approved says Spur 16 on it with all the different tenants, I believe. But they
Okay.
also have the public market and the St. Paul Fish has their own signage.
I'm trying to understand how this fits into our sign code or into some sort of consistency, rather than just a proliferation of another sign.
If you look at other town centers development, like Bay Shore.
I was directing my question to Jack Zader.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those areas where, yeah, I agree. The only other commercial application I can recall that has something similar to this is Sarah Chudnow, where they have a long wall with the name on it. But yeah, I guess I share the concern, and we don't really, we never, I guess this is such a unique circumstance that it just hasn't come up anywhere else in terms of the signage on more than just a freestanding sign, but a wall. You know, and again, the other thing that's somewhat looking back at it, we did give them a waiver for an additional wall sign. So they're allowed to have 3 wall signs, or in typical case, they'd only be allowed the 2. So this just adds to it. So again, we're trying to, you know, we want to try to appease both sides of this debate and try to come up with something that identifies that development as Foxtown, but again, incorporate the town center into that design somehow. I don't know if that answers your question or not, or sort
Okay.
of.
Kind of, I'm not sure I understand the purpose, but Commissioner Stoker.
This is a question for the applicant. If we were to table the sign portion of this and approve moving forward, obviously you've got to get footings in for this particular fence. In a worst case scenario, if we couldn't come up with something that was amenable between yourselves and the city and that didn't have anything on it, are you planning to proceed and move forward if we table just the sign portion?
We are. I wanted to at least explain the thought process at our end in terms of, what I call project identification sign. This is a substantial investment by Tom Neiman and the community, and it's a mixed-use development, and it will become a destination, and it's an integral part of the Mequon Town Center. And again, we can work with Jack and staff on incorporating that. And I think tabling the sign until we come up with something that meets mutual satisfaction, we're more than happy to table that. I just wanted to explain where we're coming from, so at least the Plan Commission understood our side of the submittal.
Thank you. I'm not necessarily my concern in signage. I voted against the Mequon sign ordinance twice, so I'm not all that thrilled with it. But I also believe that we need to be consistent. And I have some concerns about, I'm very appreciative of the development, but it's a $60 million investment. Somebody else who's making a $10 or $20 million investment, it's a tremendous investment for them. And I don't know how we differentiate and what the standard is to say, yep, this extra sign that isn't really wayfinding, doesn't really promote an individual business is fine here, but not somewhere else. And that's my concern with this. So if somebody made $100 million investment, do they get the, what do they get? I do think that there needs to be some, if we're going to have any sort of sign standards, then there needs to be some consistent application of them, or you end up with a you know, it's unfair, all those kind of arguments. And then I think we
Sure.
have some, and I think your development speaks for itself as an area and a destination. And you've got the name Foxtown plastered all over it. I'm assuming you will on the new buildings that are going up, although maybe you don't. I can't remember what the Boulangerie building and the meat market building, what signage they have. So I'm not so, by the way, also the issue of adding in some wrought iron fencing. I think that the wall is nice looking. Now, maybe you make it 2 different levels, whatever. I'm less concerned about that as long as we've got, you know, the lighting and stuff that's consistent with the rest of the area, so it looks good. So my concern is simply how do we, why is this sign here, and would it be allowed in the next project that we readdress? So any other comments, questions, a motion? Do we want to table the issue of the sign? So is there somebody who wants to make a motion to table the issue of the sign? Commissioner Stoker and Commissioner Lemke, I think I saw you second it. All in favor of tabling the issue of the sign, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Now do we have a motion on the rest? Commissioner Stoker.
I would make a motion for approval per staff's recommendations.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 The matter is tabled. Thank you for, again, Mr. Neiman, for your investment and team for a really nice looking project that adds a lot to our community.
Thank you.
The next item is a policy discussion regarding conservation subdivisions. Jack, I'm going to let you go ahead. I'll be back in a moment.
Sure, no problem. So this is something we've been working on at staff as well as the policy subcommittee. This is a change to our ordinance that would allow conservation type subdivisions in the R1 district without going through the PUD process. Currently, as you may all are aware of, that anytime that a conservation subdivision is proposed in the city, it has to be, it's basically a rezoning, which is a 3-month process. And sometimes we get neighbors out that are opposed, not necessarily of the conservation design, but they're just opposed of the development in general, and maybe use that as leverage to get the property or the project denied. So this particular approach would allow the conservation design as permitted in the R1 zoning district. It would also then incorporate specific requirements, which in the past have been more policies by staff, and then basically viewed on a case-by-case basis by the commission. So in this case, some of the highlights are what I wrote in the report. Basically, you'd have to have a 0.75 minimum lot size. Currently, in our conservation design, we've been using 1.5 acres. That 1.5 acres staff feels is large. That was something that some of the council members years ago kind of adhered to, and we just feel like the 0.75 is adequate enough, and it does allow for a lot of creativity with the subdivision versus the 1.5 acres. There's also a requirement that you'd have to have a minimum of 25 acres. So we don't want someone trying to do a conservation design on 20 acres. That'd be a 4-lot land division. It's really hard to do anything creative on such a smaller scale. So this would kick in at 25 acres. We are requiring to have at least 2 road connections, which I'll kind of address a little bit later in the report. Requiring 60% of the land area that is dedicated open space. This has been somewhat of a requirement in the past as a policy, but it's not been ratified in an ordinance form. So this would actually be in the ordinance. We are also looking at adding a bonus lot for every 40 acres of land that are part of the subdivision. This would be somewhat of an encouragement to do a conservation design. There is costs involved in a conservation design that you would not normally have in a state design. So after 40 acres, this would be a bonus. This would also encourage developers to acquire adjacent properties if they don't have enough acreage to create a more meaningful mass for the subdivision. We're also looking at a 300-foot open space buffer against public roadways. Our policy for years has been 200 feet. The subcommittee actually explored 400 feet. And after we showed some examples of what that would look like on some of our existing subdivisions, they settled on a 300-foot space buffer, 300-foot open space buffer from the front. One of the issues that we're still kind of dealing with is this issue of connectivity. There was a lot of discussion at the subcommittee level of what that would look like. In the past, we've kind of done it numerous different ways where we've required subdivisions to put in the stub roads right up to the property line. And then seeing the adjacent property come forward 10 years later, the existing subdivision does not like the connection and fights it. And then we end up having dead end stubs. Then we went to a process of having a road reservation, not actually putting in the road, but just having a reservation in place. That really doesn't help solve the issue of the neighbors not objecting once the next development comes in, because without the road there, they sometimes have the opinion that there was no connection going to be warranted. So one of the things that happened at the subcommittee, we decided was that the road would have to be brought within 150 feet of the neighboring property line where it would connect. There would have to be an eyebrow type connection where there'd be a turnaround for emergency vehicles in the meantime. And then that the rest of the area where the road would be in the future would be dedicated as right of way. And so that next development would be required to install the road for that 150 feet to tie into that eyebrow or turnaround. We felt that was somewhat of a balance between not requiring the developer that does the first subdivision to put in everything, but then also not burdening the second developer having to go 300-400 feet onto a neighboring subdivision to connect to their road. So there's some language in there that we haven't fully vetted out yet, but we just wanted to give you just the kind of idea where we're at. It's kind of a long meeting tonight. This is the last item. This is just basically for introduction and discussion. Once we fully vet it out, hopefully we'll bring this back to you next month. I just wanted to kind of put it out there for everybody to take a look at and see if there's any questions, concerns, or comments from any of the commissioners as we go forward with putting this in ordinance form and running it through the typical process. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mayor. You were involved in this as well in terms of the policy.
Yeah, and drafting a lot of it. You know, I think that I'll make an admission. There was a conservation subdivision ordinance proposed probably 15, 16, 17 years ago. I helped kill it, and I regretted that afterwards, because I think that what we did was create an argument that's unnecessary. I mean, the idea is it shouldn't take a rezoning every time somebody wants to build a subdivision, and that's what we've effectively created. In anything other than something, you know, an estate lot, and we've made the default the estate lot subdivision, as opposed to conservation subdivision, which really should be the default, at least for larger tracts of property, because those subdivisions in the unsewered part of our community have really enhanced the character. I mean, if you drive along Wauwatosa Road, it's the example I always give, and you go to the mile south of Pioneer Road, and you look at either side and you think, oh, geez, I hope someday I think to build subdivisions here. If you actually go look into it, that's all preserved land that was done based on conservation subdivisions, which give a nice view shed, a feeling, you know, if the concept that we want to have is both create neighborhoods where people are actually going to develop, but also create a more open space feel, those subdivisions do it a lot better than plopping a house down every 5 acres and you know, create McMansion sprawl. I think it's a better form of subdivision. It is what the north and west sides of Mequon, I think people expect. But this makes for a better process. And actually, you know, my concern is, well, we have standards, but we don't tell people what the standards are before they come and look. It'd be better if we actually had an ordinance where those standards are pretty clear and they don't have to fight over the individual standards, but you've got pretty clear policies. So I think that this is, I mean, you know, I'm hoping we keep a lot of rural area in Mequon, but my guess is that over time we'll continue to have some of those larger tracts of land where the owners are maybe getting older, that someday become potential development sites. And this is a proactive way to, one, maybe lock in and reaffirm to the community that we do expect 5-acre zoning in much of our rural area, and that we expect, you know, better design. So I think that this is a you know, an improvement for the north and west parts of the community. Those are my thoughts. But I would be interested now, half of you have been on the policy subcommittee and have looked at this, seen it, and commented in the past. The other half hasn't, and I'm curious what people think. Anybody? Commissioner Schaefer, Becky Schaefer. That's so confusing. And you're muted.
It is confusing, thanks. So section E on lot size, I'm looking at in the actual, in the ordinance code. I'm looking back at what Jack, 1 second. So it says that it requires 60% of the area is open space, which is great. But then in that section E, if I go back to it, I think it says no minimum. What am I missing? And I have to scroll and I'm not able to get there because everything's slow on my computer.
Are you speaking to E1?
Yep, correct.
There's no minimum lot size for an outlot or conservation
Or
area.
other area as a protected conservancy, but I thought that's what the 60% referred to. No?
Well, no, I mean, yes and no. The language basically there says an individual outlot, there is no minimum size for, but the combination of all the outlots will make up the open space that has to equal the 60%.
The yield for the total development is 60%.
Right, because you might have like a couple outlots that are bifurcated by a lot or a road or something like that. So, but when you add up the total open space, it has to equal the 60%. Well, you're muted again.
Because I have people that are making sounds around me. Was it really a 1.5 acre lot that we've been looking at in these? That seems, I'm not recalling them, and I've been sitting in the seat for a few years, so I don't know. The 0.75 seems small, but I understand your mention of being able to be more creative with that size lot.
Well, you have to remember, this is R1, so this wouldn't include like the Highlander or Enclave, because those are R3 1-acre zoning. So those actually were a lot smaller, 0.3. The last conservation design we had was the Riverland Estates, which was within the last year or so. But yeah, those lots are typically, we in the past have required those to be about 1.5 acres, which again, I think part of that decision was based on trying to accommodate a mound system on that lot. So in this case, you could use an outlot for the mound system. You don't have to keep it on the lot anymore. But we felt it does, if you can do 3/4 acre, especially on a larger conservation design, you can create more pockets and then have a lot more meaningful open space than then chewing them up with lots.
I see it. Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Stoker.
I would just comment that I think we're definitely headed in the right direction with this. The majority of the people that we build for, they don't want 5 acres, they don't want 1.5 acres. Frankly, even a 3/4 of an acre, they're hiring someone to mow their lawns these days. And with the conservation subdivision, you still get the feel of a huge open area. That one of the concerns from a builder's perspective was the location of mounds, but we're seeing more and more subdivisions set up where the mound systems can be placed in an outlot. So obviously it takes some creative design, but 3/4 of an acre is not a small lot by any stretch. Yes, compared to the 5-acre lots that you see in the estate subdivisions that we have, they're small. But I would say 75% of the people that end up on those 5 acres don't want to manicure 5 acres. A lot of the subdivisions that I think have been creative don't require it all to be manicured. And you can potentially get yourself in trouble too, that if you're not manicuring all 5 acres, what's it look like if they leave 3 of their 5 acres go wild? What's that look like in 10 years? So I think this is all a good idea. And I think most of the buying public from a potential home buyer, most of those people I think would agree with that.
My
There was-
original,
No, go ahead.
I was originally advocating that we not set a lot size. Because if you're going to put 8 homes on a piece of property and you're leaving the vast majority of it being open space, what's the city, the city has used things like lot size to control density. What's really the city's interest in deciding whether the lot is a 1/2 acre or an acre or a 1/4 of an acre? As long as you've got decent side setbacks and what have you, so that homeowners don't complain that they're, when they whistle, their next door neighbor finishes the tune. And, short, I mean, as long as and I think you can create, by making the lot size small, you're still going to have some large lots, because if the demand is for a large lot, or people at least have a lot of space around them, I guess I don't know why we care if the homeowner owns that lot or the subdivision owns that lot, and then they have an interest in common. Frankly, the 3/4 of an acre was a political compromise to try to make this saleable. I think having, and I will tell you, if you read the literature on people who are the supposed experts nationally on conservation subdivisions, they, if anything, advocate for small maximum lot sizes, not minimum lot sizes, with the thought being that you're creating larger vistas and larger open space and what have you. I think as long as you've got the appropriate density, I'd let the market kind of dictate that. I think architects like Mr. Schaefer and developers and builders are going to make decisions on what the market really wants. And the more open space, as long as we got the same number of houses, what difference does it make? Alderman Urban.
Well, I tend to agree. Everyone always trips up over the lot size versus net density.
I can't hear you.
And as long as you're, sorry, everyone always gets tripped up over the lot size versus density. As long as you're getting the density you want, the lot size is largely irrelevant. So I live on let's just over a 3/4 of an acre, and I'm lucky enough that 1/3 of it's underwater in part of the subdivision stormwater pond that is technically mine, because I don't have to maintain that. 3/4 of an acre is a fairly large yard to maintain yourself these days. So I could wrap my head around going lower in a conservation type subdivision. We have some that are around 1/3 of an acre that actually do quite well. Thinking of subdivision over, I'm drawing a blank now, in my old district.
I mean, think about it. If they were
lack of cores.
If they were 1/4 of an acre, and I'm not advocating for that, and at the end of the day, you were preserving 36 acres of space in a 40-acre parcel, rather than under our old standards, which was more like you're preserving 20 acres or 20 something, once you put in roads and stuff. Haven't you really done a better job in conserving the rural character by allowing a slightly smaller lot size and created more of a neighborhood. But I'll also tell you that, oh, nuts, I lost my train of thought. Now I feel like I'm really old. Who's next? Anybody? I'm just tired. Anybody have any concerns, objections? I think it'll be an interesting discussion at the Common Council, but maybe the time has come to kind of codify what the city. Oh, I think the other thing we're doing here, maybe more formally and with a little more force, is requiring dealing with noxious weeds and landscape plans than perhaps the city has actually been doing with some of the conservation subdivisions recently, which I think is a good thing for the rural parts of our community. That was going to be my point. Anybody else? Well, anything, Jack or Kim? Kim, do you have a voice this meeting? Hello. Okay. No, she doesn't. Our next meeting is February 22nd. Is the currently next scheduled meeting? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hey, thank you all for your evening. Have a good week.